Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for a very exciting conversation. My name is Regina. I'm the Executive Director of Food Recovery Network. I'm so excited about today's conversation. We have a lot of amazing content. I cannot wait to introduce to everyone our two speakers for today. I'm actually just moderating, bringing us together, but Renee and Dheeraj are actually going to be the ones having this conversation. I might chime in, as I tend to do, but I know that everyone listening in, you're all really in for just an information and inspiring packed conversation. So before I introduce our two speakers, I did want to just give a bit of an introduction around, why are we having this conversation today? Advocacy is so important in us being able to shape the world that we want to live in. And advocacy comes in so many different forms. So our student leaders, all of you listening in, and all of your supporters, you're doing the right thing every single day by recovering surplus food from your college campuses, from surrounding food businesses, wherever that food might be. And you're making sure that that food gets to where it needs to go in your communities. And that is so extremely important. And on the other side, advocacy helps us to make sure that people know about that incredible work that you're doing. And we're going to get into more of that with the Food Donation Improvement Act. But also advocacy is education. A lot of people don't understand the sheer problem that all of us are tackling every day when we do those food recoveries. But also policy changes, advocacy to make different policy changes to help us in providing more access to people is just so incredibly vital. So we're going to touch into all of that in this conversation today. And I really want everyone to feel like wherever you're at, when you listen into this conversation, that we're glad that you're here. Advocacy can sometimes feel like an overwhelming term. I know I feel that way sometimes, but we want this to just be a touch point for you to help widen your aperture of knowledge, also to help you feel really secure in what you do every single day around advocacy, and also to help, plant some seeds of curiosity. We have lots of conversations around this topic of advocacy, and two in particular I want to highlight to you that we've had in the past is with the incredible Robert Egger, and he is the person who started DC Central Kitchen, and also a newspaper here in the DC area that highlights the voice of people who are unhoused. It's a really incredible newspaper. And so Robert talks about why he decided advocacy was the place for him, where he wanted to be that rebel rouser, he wanted to shake things up, and where advocacy came into that for him. We also had a conversation with a student and alumni advisory board member, Angela Lynn, with two other really incredible speakers, talking about why voting is so important. And we talked about maybe some of the emotions that some of us have around voting. So I definitely recommend those two conversations. I touched upon the Food Donation Improvement Act. With Renee, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and I'm really excited. So how can we draw these policy changes, these new laws that are enacted? How can we celebrate that, but also make that feel real for our everyday lives as food recovery advocates? So there's lots of on-ramps, for everyone here. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We're really here to make your food recovery efforts as easy as possible. We're here to help problem solve. But to use that word again, we're really here to celebrate with you because you are doing some incredible work by doing food recovery. And with that, I'm really excited to introduce to everyone here today Dheeraj Bandaru and Renee. You know what? I am totally gonna. I was like, oh yeah, I can totally do it with your last name. Before everyone listening in, we'd had this wonderful conversation about making sure that we can pronounce people's names, and I feel like I just jinxed myself. So Renee, I'm just gonna say Renee, and then can you say your last?
No worries, Renee Albrecht.
See, I knew that I could do it, Renee Albrecht, but then I psyched myself out. Thank you for that grace, Renee. So I just wanted to introduce more fully to everyone, Renee and Dheeraj. And then I'm going to turn things over to Dheeraj because, as I said earlier, this is a conversation that Dheeraj is going to have with Renee about her work and some of the things that are really important around advocacy for Food Recovery Network. So with that, let me tell you a little bit more about Dheeraj. Dheeraj might already be a familiar face to many of you, but Dheeraj is originally from Centerville, Virginia, and is an incoming master's student at the University of Chicago, majoring in computer science, and we love Chicago. Um, and also, many of you might know this, but Dheeraj was an active member of Georgia Tech's Campus Kitchens project for the past 3 years before he moved over to Chicago. And Dheeraj was the president there, which is really incredible. And while he was there at Georgia Tech, Dheeraj previously interned at the City of Atlanta and helped support the Aglanta program. And we also love the City of Atlanta because they've helped us. We have a gleaning project that we're doing there right now, and we work very closely with the City of Atlanta. So this really nice connection that we have with Dheeraj. Dheeraj is excited to lead FRN's Student and Alumni Advisory Board for this upcoming year and to help make an impact. So Dheeraj, thanks so much for being with us today. Yeah.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yay. And then Renee. So I met Renee several months ago in late summer, early fall, when we both attended an event all around the Farm Bill. And so you might have heard some talking about the Farm Bill. It is set to be renewed this year. We're going to have a lot more information about the Farm Bill. It is an area where there's a lot of conversation, a lot of work that can be done around food recovery efforts and nutrition and hunger relief efforts. So I'm really excited that Renee could join us for this conversation. So Renee is the Senior Policy Advocate, Food and Freshwater, and works at WWF. As the Senior Policy Advocate, Renee drives policy and advocacy efforts for WWF's goals related to food and freshwater systems. So when I said earlier, we're talking to the right person here. So I'm super excited to hear more about what Renee has to say. Renee works with members of Congress and their staff, U.S. government agencies, non-government organizations, and other key stakeholders to advance policies that protect freshwater sources, safeguard critical landscape, and promote a more sustainable and resilient food system. Wow. Thank you for all that you do. That's incredible. And again, I know we're going to get to hear more about what that means for you in your day-to-day. But for now, I'm going to turn things over to Dheeraj. And again, thank you so much, Dheeraj, for leading us in this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, Regina. So yeah, like Regina mentioned, my name is Dheeraj. And yeah, I've been spending the past 2 years on the FRN Student and Alumni Advisory Board, and I've just been super excited to engage with FRN stakeholders and FRN chapters and students and helping this organization grow its impact out by really understanding what the student leaders really want. I did spend the past 3 years, as Regina mentioned, at Georgia Tech as the president of my FRN chapter, where we did a lot of great work that I was super excited to do and help Atlanta with, as Atlanta deals with a lot of food insecurity, and Georgia Tech always has a lot of food left over. But I was super excited when Regina reached out to me regarding this particular conversation because I really did want to learn more about what political advocacy from a college student standpoint looks like, especially as a student leader. At Georgia Tech, when I was a student leader, we tried multiple different things to help generate campus advocacy regarding acts like the Food Donation Improvement Act that got passed earlier in the year. And so having this conversation, I'm hoping to understand more about how students can help drive that impact both within their college campuses as well as their general communities. Yeah, with that being said, we can go right into our questions to hear from Renee, who is our guest today. And so my first question for you, Renee, is what is the point of younger voters and college students engaging with Congress? And what is that like, and what is the benefit to their everyday lives and operations, specifically as student leaders?
Great, thank you. And I want to, kick things off by thanking you so much for having me, and also thanking everyone listening for interest in this super important topic and the great work that you all are doing, as well as the great work of the Food Recovery Network. So, as you all heard, I have the pleasure of working in policy advocacy with World Wildlife Fund. And one of the key areas of focus for my work is policy and advocacy around the issue of food waste. And folks are sometimes surprised to hear that World Wildlife Fund is so focused on the issue of food waste. But the thing is, when we waste food, we're also wasting all the soil and water and energy that went into producing it. And so this is, all the way from the farm to processing to shipping and then ultimately to disposal. So that really adds up to a lot of unnecessary carbon emissions and destruction of native ecosystems for agricultural land. And so it's a really inefficient use of natural resources and ecosystems and the impacts on wildlife when we waste food. And of course, we know on the humanitarian side that millions of people every day are going hungry or suffering from insufficient nutrition. And so it's so awful to think about the food being thrown away and how it could be helping someone who might need it. So for these reasons, addressing food loss and waste is really key to World Wildlife Fund's vision of building a future where people and nature can really thrive together. So I am really excited about this conversation today because I'm super passionate about policy advocacy. It's really fulfilling to me because I believe that policy is one of the most powerful tools that we have at our disposal to make meaningful change in the world. And this is especially true, on issues like food loss and waste. These issues are so impacted by policy, and our advocacy around those issues can have really profound impacts for the environment and socially. So another reason why I'm so excited for our conversation today and the timeliness of this is that while the time is always right to make sure that your voice is heard, now is really a timely moment, especially on the issue of food waste and food recovery and nutrition. The Farm Bill is up for reauthorization this year, as Regina mentioned earlier in the call. And this really only happens about every 5 years. And what this means is that our nation's major food and agriculture programs are up for full debate right now during this reauthorization process. And a little bit of background on the Farm Bill for those who may be less familiar. The Farm Bill governs programs that have profound effects on social safety nets, food access, food recovery and waste, and agricultural production more generally. So there's a really big opportunity right now during the reauthorization process to engage and make a lot of positive impact. And engagement from younger voters and college students can really help move the needle. The more you can make your voice heard, the more likely we are to really make this positive change. EPA and USDA actually announced a goal of cutting food waste in half by 2030. And this important goal can really be advanced through the Farm Bill. So we really want to see the Farm Bill strengthening and enacting policies that accelerate progress towards that goal. So at the federal level, one of the best things you can do right now is engage your elected officials and make sure that your voice is heard in these important conversations around the Farm Bill.
Awesome. That's so cool to know that the Farm Bill is up for reauthorization right now. I guess that begs to the question, what exactly can we talk to Congress about as young people? And, a lot of us aren't exactly situated in farmland areas. So how much influence do our representatives in Congress have over the bill?
Yeah, that's a great question. And kind of how I'll lead with that is one of the best things you can do when you're speaking with a member of Congress is talk about why the issue at hand, so in this case, food recovery and food waste, is so important to you. Make it personal, and then why it's so important to you. I would say it's great if you can follow that up by requesting a specific action that you want the member of Congress to take to address the issue. So, whether that's co-sponsoring a particular bill or supporting a certain provision in the 2023 Farm Bill or something else entirely, it's really great when you have those sorts of actions that you want them to take. And if you can include, a personal story that illustrates why this issue is so important to you, that's even better. And it makes your concerns more memorable and really stick in that member of Congress's brain. On the topic of food recovery and food insecurity, speaking about your personal experiences tackling the issue on campus or talking about how food recovery has impacted your life personally really helps. And then, on the question of the best way to determine how much influence your particular member of Congress that you're speaking with has on a certain issue, I would say it's really great to check out their website and really explore the particular committees and caucuses that member of Congress is engaged with or leading on. And also take a look at the press releases that they have had on their website recently, and that'll tell you what sort of legislation they're actively working on. And so the more that you can really connect your story and your asks to what that member of Congress is actually working on, the better. But that's not to say that you shouldn't share your perspective either way, even if it's not something that the member of Congress is actively working on. Because most of all, it's so important to remember that your representatives in Congress work for you, and it's their job to represent your voice and your perspectives in the legislative process. So by sharing your perspective with them, whatever it is, you're really helping them do their job more effectively.
Awesome. And then I guess to follow up on that, can you provide us an example of maybe like a personal story or perspective provided by a young person that you've seen possibly make an impact when it got to coming up with new legislation regarding food?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we see a lot of impact in schools in particular. World Wildlife Fund has a lot of initiatives that we work on related to preventing food waste in K through 12 schools. And I think a lot of times what we've seen is that when young students, I mean, in this case, it's not college students, it is children, but when children get really passionate about addressing the issue of food waste from a program that has happened at their school or that's occurring at their school, they are really powerful advocates in their community. They go home and they talk to their parents about why food waste is such a problem, and their parents are voters, and they then can push for the kind of change that they want to see in the issue of food waste. So I think that's just one example. We really can see, in this case, young kids leading the way, but I think college students as well can have such a profound impact.
And one more follow-up question on that. How exactly, like logistically or operationally, do young people have the ability to reach out to their Congress people or representatives?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know, a lot of us are not necessarily in the DC area, but certainly your members of Congress have district offices, and hopefully, those are accessible to you. But what's likely more accessible is, of course, just writing an email. So that is a really great way to engage your member of Congress is writing to them. I personally have engaged with my member of Congress independently from my role at WWF, and have always been happy, to get a response back and hear that they're actually listening to my concerns and my perspectives. So I would say that is, one of the most accessible ways is writing to them.
Awesome. And then do you mind telling us a little bit about what's on the horizon for WWF and how students can engage with WWF as well?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks for asking that. So I'm super excited to share that World Wildlife Fund actually launched our recommendations for Congress for the 2023 Farm Bill yesterday publicly. And so these recommendations are available on the WWF website, and there is a section in there specifically about the issue of food waste. So this is a really great resource if you're wondering, what some of the specific asks are that you can make for your member when you're speaking with your member of Congress. So, I just talked a second ago about writing to your member of Congress. One thing you can do is take some of the specific asks from WWF's recommendations around food waste and send those along, if they resonate with you and you feel that they are reflecting your perspective. I will also flag that World Wildlife Fund is starting to look at opportunities to address food waste at the state level. So I know we've been talking federally so far, but we are starting to look at some key states such as Michigan, Illinois, and Colorado. And those conversations are just getting started. So we are super excited to continue the conversation there. And we can't wait to continue to talk about opportunities where students and young voters can engage at the state level. So please do stay tuned.
Awesome. Well, all of that was super useful, and I'm glad you took some time to talk to us today, Renee. Look forward to looking through the WWF webpage to see all of those things that you mentioned, all those resources you mentioned. Yeah, I think hopefully this helped everyone that was listening understand a little bit more about what advocacy means from a student leader perspective, or even just as a college student. And yeah, I want to hand things back off to Regina.
Thank you so much, Dheeraj. This was so helpful. And if you both don't mind, I have a couple of comments that I think you both might be able to add some more texture to. In particular, Renee, when Dheeraj was asking you about, young people being engaged, from my perspective, what I tell young people a lot is the Gen Z and moms, traditionally moms, um, still wield a lot of power when it comes to decision making around food. So this is why young people, as people who are, in their 20s into their 30s, are such an important critical group of people just coming together because of an age. Everyone's so diverse and all over the United States, but it is the largest living generation in the United States currently that happens to be of voting age. So again, when we think about all the on-ramps for wherever you might be, um, with engaging with advocacy, this is why it's so important. Just you are a very big group of people. Dheeraj, I wondered if you wouldn't mind talking to us a little bit about, you attended with me the White House conference on hunger, health, and nutrition, and you told me like how that changed your perspective when you thought about advocacy. Would you mind telling us that story? And because I think it's really important,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people share your same sentiment.
Yeah. So just for some context, Regina invited me on behalf of FRN to go to the White House conference on health, hunger, and nutrition, I believe was the order. And it was this amazing conference, and I was myself and a couple other student leaders, one from SOB and a couple from the local DC area. And we were able to interact with some of the biggest stakeholders in the food insecurity space, both for-profit, nonprofit, social good enterprises, government organizations. And it was just amazing to see people from all walks of life working on this problem. I talked to one person who had started a food pantry for their labor union, and I asked him if it was a common occurrence for the White House to invite them for the work they've done regarding hunger. And he jokingly was like, "Yes, I do this every year." And then he clarified for me, because I didn't get the joke, that this is like a first time thing. Like, this is the first time he'd ever been recognized for the work he had done, and how of importance, how, in the general population has found an importance with a lot of the work FRN and like accompanying stakeholders in the food insecurity space have been addressing hunger. It became a forefront issue, and people during the conference, I learned a lot about how The United States has set a lot of goals to end hunger in the United States, at least in relatively soon in the near future, mainly because a lot of in food insecurity is due to issues regarding like the Food Donation Improvement Act, where it's hard to donate food, or people get punished for giving away food due to like sanitary issues or legislation that makes it hard to donate food. So even when food waste exists in a lot of different organizations, it's hard for them to donate it, or it's hard to find the right outlets and to serve the communities that are underserved. So there's a lot of discussion and a lot of great ideas. There's also like the whole providing SNAP coverage for more people, to accommodate for the changing conditions in our society, and other, food related support systems. But overall, I mentioned to Regina that the experience was so amazing, and I'm really thankful that she took me because it gave me hope that hunger can be ended soon. And this kind of is similar to what Renee is talking about. There's a lot of stuff that us as individuals can do to help impact the government and make it easier for us to end hunger. Help like all the organizations like Food Recovery Network and all these other individuals throughout the country working to end hunger. That job can be made a lot easier with the help of government.
Yeah, and thank you for relaying that to all of us, Dheeraj. And Stephanie, part of the conversation that we had earlier with Angela, Lynn, also on Sob with Dheeraj, was all about the emotions, the difficulty it might feel when we're trying to vote, when we're trying to figure out where do we vote, even if, we're renters, so what's the point of voting? Anything at all that people are feeling when, Dheeraj was mentioning to me that, you think about the federal level and man, it can be very slow changing. We're doing all this hard work on the ground and we're not getting the support. Sometimes it feels that way from policy change. And now here we have the Food Donation, Improvement Act that has been passed. It's really great. But Renee, I just wondered, you have your career, in this work. What might you want young people to know in terms of that feeling that they might have around the slowness that it sometimes can feel when we are trying to make the change because we need to feed people right now, and we're not necessarily seeing that reflected at the federal level?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I can really sympathize with that frustration. I think what I would, say to people doing this work is sometimes when you're really in the thick of it, it can be hard to realize how much you are paving the way for these sorts of victories further down the line. And it might feel like you're not making any progress, but a lot of times you are opening up the door to something that is going to be possible, within a matter of years. Because when we start having these conversations, when we start raising awareness about these sorts of issues, we're getting people talking about them. And that's the first step to making any sort of positive change is getting that awareness going. And so that in and of itself is a victory. While you might not, have passed the bill you wanted to pass or have achieved the specific goal that you were after, you are moving in that direction. And everything that we're doing along the way is helping ultimately, even if we can't always see that in the moment. So, like you said, Regina, doing this work professionally, I have to remember that a lot of times because it can be really hard to kind of see those goals that you want to see. But remembering that everything that you're doing is part of a bigger picture and, a longer story is really what makes this work so rewarding for me.
Oh, that's so wonderful. And a couple of other things that I wanted to touch on. I want everyone to know listening in that we will absolutely share, the work of World Wildlife Fund, so that you all have access to those resources. We will share that all over the place. So again, to make those on-ramps super easy for you. And then within that, when Renee was talking about to all of us, figuring out what committees or caucuses your elected officials are part of, that is such a really great way to just, begin to ease in a little bit. I would even say become familiar with one committee. Now you know a committee. Maybe you didn't even know any committees. Now you know one committee and talk about it all the time. That one committee that you might know. And then you will begin to hear that committee more often. You'll begin to hear other people who are on that committee. It just begins to open up that aperture. It's such an exciting process. And Renee, kind of maybe back to you. Again, you have your career in this. I was just wondering what led you to, want to work within policy, want to work with our elected officials, and then specifically within the space of WWF.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the root of all of it is really my passion for protecting our environment. That's something that even as a young kid, I really cared about, and it was something that, has stuck with me my whole life thus far. So I think that's really at the root of it. But, why policy? I think that for me, as I started thinking about the problems that we were facing, in our environment and how we were really going to get things done, policy was really the way that, we can bring these solutions to scale and really see the needle moving on some of these huge issues that we're tackling right now and working to address. And so to me, the act of engaging in advocacy is truly an act of hope and, looking forward to the future and what the future could be. To me, that is kind of how I got engaged in this, especially from the perspective of World Wildlife Fund, being interested in the environment and protecting the environment. And then policy just as a powerful tool to really see the change that I wanted to see in the realm of the environment.
Thank you for that. And Dheeraj, I just wonder, now that you and I've had several conversations and, you did attend the event, I just wondered from your perspective as a young leader, as somebody who is grappling with the right altitude to be involved around policy, what thoughts do you have around, maybe if I can put you on the spot to talk a little bit more about, some of the things that just because you are of the age group around, some of the things that you want to see accomplished, and maybe why, some of the feelings and thinkings that our student leaders have that are so invested in their communities and helping to end hunger in their communities.
Yeah, good question. I obviously can't speak for everyone, but for me personally, after seeing all of this, I'm just, again, inspired to go out into my community and continue doing the work that, we've been doing so far, because there seems to be more and more support as time goes on. And it's becoming easier to help my community, which is obviously a huge win. And like Renee said, that's thanks to the help of a lot of different people before me who've paved this way. A lot of them were at that White House conference. A lot of them weren't, but they put in a lot of work to make it a lot easier for, us as student leaders to help our community, whether it be recovering food, donating food. Yeah, it's just amazing. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I have from this. It's a long process, but it's one that I'm very committed to, and I feel like a lot of people are seeing value in pursuing because people are supporting them as they go through this process, whether it be people coming out to volunteer for your local food recovery event, or a new bill being passed that makes it easier for restaurants in your area to give away food. It could be as there's like the Good Samaritan law that makes it easy to actually donate food without liability, which helped improve our recovery acts a lot better. There's a lot of new legislation and support and push for sustainability, which plays into a lot of the stuff we do here at FRN. And like Renee said, sustainability is a huge focus for WWF as well. Um, it's it yeah, I guess to summarize my thoughts, that's the biggest takeaway, that it's becoming easier and easier to help my community, which makes me more committed to helping my community, because I like doing things that are easier.
Yes, and we deserve that. We deserve for this to be easy, to do the right thing, to recover surplus food, to do the right thing and ensure that people in our community are not suffering from food insecurity. You are absolutely right. Um, Renee, I wanted to, again, just to highlight, the resources that we're going to share with everyone to, again, begin to pull into our everyday world, some of the ways that it can become easier for us to engage. Now, it doesn't mean we have to, drop everything and commit fully to this. These small acts can really make such a big change. And part of those small acts are becoming a little bit more informed. And the resources that WWF will share with all of us is a really big step in being able to do that. So you had mentioned, and I'm pulling together, what Dheeraj was talking about earlier with SNAP, and just the understanding that college students, you are eligible for SNAP benefits, and so that was part of some legislation that FRN was spreading the word about, that if you many of you who are going to college qualify for SNAP benefits. And sorry, my camera just went a little out of whack here. And so, that's a federal benefit program that really does touch your everyday life. But Renee, you had talked about there were 3 states that WWF is sort of like, focusing on. It was Michigan, Colorado, and I'm sorry, I forgot the third state.
Illinois.
Yeah, but if you wouldn't mind, I don't know if you can at this moment in time, but again, just to drill that down from federal, now we're going into some states. We have chapters in all of those states. Can you tell us a little bit about why those states were important for WWF?
Sure. I can give a little bit of a preview. I will say our state-based work is something that we're still kind of unfolding and starting to think a little bit more about. But I think part of the reason that those states really stick out is because they, I think Michigan in particular, they're purple legislatively. And so it's really a powerful way to say, this is a nonpartisan thing. Food, we all want to not be wasteful, and we all want to not see people go hungry. So I think that, doing this in a state that, like Michigan, a lot of different other states can relate to Michigan because they are purple. Very, a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, kind of by the urban areas. It's a state that I think a lot of other states can kind of look to and see themselves in. So that was one reason that we kind of looked at some of the states we did. But, as I mentioned before, certainly stay tuned on the state work. I think that's an area we're really going to be building out further and may continue to grow and change in terms of which states we focus on.
Oh, so amazing. Thank you for that preview. Everyone listening in, I mean, we have this amazing new resource. We have reasons to keep going back to the WWF website. So thank you so much for that, Renee. And, again, just thinking about federal level into the state level, some of you might know that California and New York State both have restrictions on organics going into landfill. And so we can even see, where FRN, where we have chapters in those 2 states, where your work is so vital to ensuring that we're not putting perfectly good food into landfill, that we're making sure that food goes to where it needs to go. And I think, all of the things that Renee just said about purple states, where I have yet to meet anybody who said, I love wasting food. I've yet to meet somebody who has said that. And I have met so many people who contemplate with me, like, I always wondered what happened to all that food after, XYZ events. And sadly, we've all been confronted by food insecurity and actual hunger in our communities. So this is just a wonderful thing. So thank you so much for previewing that. And Dheeraj and Renee, thank you both so much for your time today. I learned so much. I knew I was going to get this dose of inspiration. I feel so good. Thank you both for providing that for me personally, but also on behalf of everyone listening, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has really been incredible. And I do, again, just want to thank everyone listening for their interest in all the great work that FRN is doing.
Excellent. And we're going to continue this conversation with WWF with Renee. We consider WWF a partner. I love talking to Renee. So everyone listening in, just know, again, more to come. And if you ever have any questions, I know Renee is here to help support you all in your journey. I'm here to support you. Dheeraj is here. So we can help when we know what your questions are, when we know if you have any barriers, if you need a dose of inspiration, any of those things, we're here. I just wanted to wrap us up with a few next steps and some previews of what's to come for FRN. We know a few things that's to come for WWF, and I'm so excited about that. But we're trying something new with this conversation. So Dheeraj and Renee, have this wonderful, amazing conversation that's so topical for all of us that are recovering food all across the United States. And I'd mentioned Angela Lynn a couple of times about this wonderful conversation that, like Dheeraj, Angela moderated the conversation. And Angela is going to record a response to this conversation with Dheeraj and Renee. Kind of like what happens after the State of the Union, there's a response afterward. Angela is just so talented in reflecting on information that she's heard around food recovery. And so we're so excited that Renee said, sure, I'll listen in and give my thoughts on what I've heard. So we're going to have that recording to all of you in maybe a week or two. So stay tuned for that. I wanted to let everybody know that myself, Erin Price, our FRN's amazing program manager, and Julia, our amazing program associate, we're all heading out to do a huge, large-scale event recovery right before the Super Bowl. It's the Bullseye Players Tailgate party, and so we're going to recover the food from that event. And so if you're not already, please do follow us along on social media. We're super excited about that. Some upcoming conversations that I'm going to have to continue just different altitudes around advocacy and how we can all be involved. I'm having a conversation with Jen Chandler, Chief of Staff for Representative Jim McGovern. And so Congressman Jim McGovern, was one of the co-sponsors for the Food Donation Improvement Act. And so we're going to dig in with Jen, who is so instrumental in making sure that Mr. McGovern could do what he needs to do to push forward this legislation that is now, it's been signed by President Biden. We're going to talk with Jen about what does the Food Donation Improvement Act mean for all of us? How can we make this real in our everyday lives? So I'm super excited about that. I'm having a conversation in the near future with a person who works over at Tony's Chocolate. This really cool organization. They make chocolate, super cool. And we're just going to talk about what it means for them, a chocolate producer, to work sustainably and ethically, meaning we need to end child slavery when producing chocolate. And Tony's Chocolate is going to talk with us about that. All of you will get an invitation to our March Roundtable. This is the twice annual conversation that we have. And I know as student leaders, you talk to Erin and you talk to Julia and you have town halls with Dheeraj. But this is our public-facing conversation where we're halfway through our program year. So we're going to talk about how things went the first half of the year and where we're going for the remainder of this program year. So I hope you can listen in to that. We'll record it and make sure it's available to you on all the many platforms. So thank you again, everyone, for listening in. This was such a special conversation for me, and I hope that you all enjoy it as well. And let us know if there's other topics that you want to listen in on. Tell us what you want, and we'll try our best to make it happen. But again, to Dheeraj and Renee, thank you so much for your time and for this wonderful discussion.
My pleasure. Thank you.